on
Okay,
there?
we still got that feedback. What? Someone hit, I think someone's got to go mute. No?
Hello?
Yeah, whatever that did, that knocked it off. Whatever you just did. Okay? So,
Who's
right,
doing what?
I know someone killed the feedback. We were getting a lot of feedback on the phone. So this is Parsha Shmos, and this is, as they say in the book, this is Exodus of Exodus. So what is going on here? We go into a whole new book of the Torah, and this is now the Jewish nation. Up until this point, we've been dealing with individuals and growing families. We now have 70 souls who are now down in Egypt, Jewish, that came from the DNA of Yaakov. You know, there's wives from the outside that got in, but this is 70 people can link themselves directly to being born from Yaakov, Jacob, our father. The first generation dies out, and this happens all the time. You lose generations, and they hand it over to the next generation. And a king rose up, and he didn't know who Joseph was. Now, it didn't mean it either meant it was a current king. He forgot about how important Joseph was to him, you know, or he was a new king, and he just didn't care that Joseph saved the country. And the Jews are flourishing, and the Jews are assimilating like crazy. We're everywhere. We're in the circus. We're in the football stadiums. We're everywhere in society, and we're making those Egyptians nervous, and we're growing in numbers. So they have a ruse, and they said, you know what? These Jews, they may take over the country. It was the first anti-Semitic. Well, that people learn a lot of anti-Semitic concepts from the beginning of the book of Exodus, that they're fearful of what we'll do, even though we're really not doing it. And so to make a long story short, they put us in slavery, and they want to kill all the men. Why do they want to kill all the men that are born? Because they knew that the Messiah, through their astrology, they knew the Messiah had not been born yet. But they knew the Messiah was going to be born, and he was going to be a male. They knew the Jews were going to have a savior who's going to get them out of there. So Pharaoh said, "Kill all the boys," and the women refused, who were the midwives, and it happened that Moses got born. He got born early. So what it was is they looked for the pregnant women. And they knew, if a woman gave birth, they knew she was in her 9th month, and then they trail after her and try to kill the males. But since Moses was born after 6 months and 2 days, his mother had a free 3 months. They didn't suspect her for 3 months. Moses lived in the home, and then that's when they put him in the little boat and put him in the Nile. After that, and that was very fortunately picked up by Pharaoh's daughter, and she converted to Judaism. Pharaoh's daughter. I think she left with the Jews when they went. No, did she leave with the Jews? I don't know. But she saved Moses, and his name comes from her. Okay, his name comes from her. We call him Moses. Moses is the Hebrew version of the Egyptian name that she named him. And it's very important that it says that all the Jews, by the way, were divorcing their wives. They wanted to divorce their wives because no one wanted to have children anymore because they knew that the children were being killed. And they were told, no, even though our children are being killed, you have to be married and have children. That's the Jewish way. Don't try to outthink God in your life. So people came back together, were having children, and there was infanticide going on. And it said very interestingly, a man from the house of Levi married a daughter from the house of Levi. Moses was a Levi. And why did it say that? Because and they gave birth to Moses. Why did it say a man married this daughter from the house of Levi? Because it had to say that Moses is going to speak to God. Moses is going to bring the people out of the land of Egypt. Moses is going to do wonders, okay? Moses is a human being. Unlike other people want to make their leaders into deities, we don't. He's human. Moses is completely human. He's going to make a lot of mistakes, and we just want to say he comes from being a human. So, still got that feedback. Moses is as it were, he grows up in the house of Paro and a Pharaoh, and he goes out from the house and he sees the Jews in their plight of slavery. He knows he's Jewish. Why? Because his mother was his nurse mommy. It just worked out. His mother was this nurse mommy. She got hired. Paro's daughter hired the mother to nurse Moses. And so Moses knows who he is, but he's growing up in Pharaoh's house. So he's going to Harvard, and he's getting the best education. But at the same time, he knows he's Jewish. He goes out and he sees what's happening to the Jewish people, and to make a long story short, he kills an Egyptian. He kills an Egyptian who's beating a Jew, and the next day he goes out and he tells two Jews to quit fighting, and the two Jews say, "What? You're going to kill us like you killed the Egyptian?" And Moses realizes people know, he killed the Egyptian. He's in trouble. The word gets back to Pharaoh that he killed an Egyptian, and Moses hightails it out of Egypt at the age of either 12 or 20. Not quite sure which one. It is different traditions. And he lives for the next 60-plus years in exile all over the place. He goes down into Africa. He's put into jail. He becomes a chieftain. He has a whole history. Why don't we include it in the Torah? Because it's not important for the story of the Torah. That's not what the Torah is about. The Torah is not about Moses' biography. That's not what the Torah is. The Torah is supposed to glean lessons of life from the Torah. So Moses he meets a person named Yitro. Yitro is the first official convert to in the world history. He hasn't converted yet. He will. And I still got that feedback, and I'm suspecting.
I have a feeling it's my phone.
I think it's your phone, yeah. So
Let me
maybe
try calling you from another line.
Call me from another line. We'll hold on for 30 seconds. I'll talk to Steve. Steve, you there?
I'm here. I put mine on mute.
Okay, that's great. All right. So, life is good?
Life is good.
Okay, life is good. All right.
The kids are at summer camp, or winter camp, sorry.
Winter camp. Life is good. Life is even better. Right. That's what.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, we get the kids in camp. That's a lot of fun. That's good. So, Moses marries Yitro's daughter, and it's in that time that Moses encounters the burning bush. I'm not going to go into the whole story, but what does the burning bush mean? It means that you can be under oppression, the burning, and yet the bush did not burn. The bush did not burn. It looked like it was on fire, but it didn't burn away. And what we learn from that is you can have a lot of life can be very hard on you. It can oppress you, but it doesn't have to destroy you. You destroy you, but don't let circumstances destroy you. You can give in to circumstances, but it doesn't mean that those circumstances themselves are going to consume you. So the Jewish people were being oppressed, but they weren't being consumed. We weren't going to die off. We would continue our tradition, even though we would be under a lot of oppression. And that's part of the burning bush. And that he looked at the burning bush. How long do you have to look at a bush and realize it's not burning, right? You see something on fire, a month ago everything was on fire. You look at a tree on fire, the tree's going to burn. No, the tree wasn't. Imagine looking at all the stuff that was burning and, it's not burning. It's on fire, but it's not burning. So that took a certain kind of mind. That was Moses' mind. He realized this thing's burning, and from that, God then, revealed himself to Moses, and Moses he wanted Moses. How this happened, I can't tell you. Moses wasn't learning in yeshiva. Moses was in Pharaoh's house. Moses was in exile from the Jewish people who were being enslaved. How did Moses develop the spiritual wherewithal to become the main prophet of the Jewish people, where no one would ever equal him ever in the history of man? How did he develop that? Right? That's a good question. I really can't answer that right now, but he was an incredibly humble person who looked at the world as everything is God, and through that he was able to ascertain God to the point where God reached out to him and had the most intimate relationship a human being could ever have with the creator of the universe. That's the short answer. So he says, okay, you have what it takes to take the Jewish people out. And he says, no way, I can't speak. Moses had some kind of a speech impediment. There's different stories what happened, but he says, I can't do it. He argued with God at the burning bush for 1 week. It was a 1 week argument. Imagine that. Who argues about becoming the leader of the Jewish people? People die to become the leader of the Jewish people. People, right? Moses didn't want to be the leader of the Jewish people. And that's something we learn as well. We don't necessarily, there's sometimes when there's no one else to lead, we lead. But it's not like we're looking to lead. In fact, it says Jewish leaders die early deaths because the job is so tough to be a leader of the Jewish people, to be a shul rabbi or whatever. You're going to get so much flack in your life. And Moses did. He got a ton of flack over the years, as we'll see. He didn't want it, but he was the man, and he finally accepted it. And God gave him, and this is the real short-cut answer, God gave him 3 signs. He goes, how will the Jewish people know that I'm the Messiah for them? And God says, and he says, tell them, my name. He gave him a name, and they'll know. Moses, come on. He says, if that name doesn't work, if they don't, when I say that name, he goes, well, here's what you're going to do. He gave him a staff that became a snake. He told Moses to put his hand into his breast pocket and pull it out, and his hand was for the leprosy. He says, put it back in. He put his hands back in. He pulled it out again. It was healed. And then he said, okay, now throw. That's the second sign. Number 1, here's the staff that becomes a snake. Number 2, the leprosy of your hand I cured. Number 3, throw water on the ground and it'll become blood. Do those 3 things in front of the Jewish people, they'll believe you. So what's going on here? What's going on is the Jews are going to be redeemed after 210 years. Everybody knows it's 400 years in the land of slavery. Why 210 years? Because the Jews knew we had to clean up three big mistakes that the world was doing. Number 1, I'm not going to go into the full details, but we had to clean up the mistakes of there was sexual immorality, there was idolatry, and there was murder. And the Jews had to be in Egypt for 400 years to clean that out of their personalities, so to clean that out of the world. We say there's 3 cardinal sins that a Jew must die for. You cannot do them. You cannot kill another person. You cannot have sexual immorality. And you cannot worship idols. And if you're forced to do one of the 3, you have to give up your life. Those are the 3 cardinal sins. And the Jews...
when Moses went up to Sinai, they did that.
Exactly. Very good. The golden calf, they did all 3. So, that's why we got... that's one of the reasons we got 40 more years in the desert.
400 years.
What's that?
This is after 400 years.
No, 210. The Jews came out after 210 years. They got 190. They got cut short 190 years. Moses took them out. They were very nervous about that. They said, "Yeah, but we haven't completed what we needed to do in Egypt." He says, "You got to come out anyways, because here's the problem. If I don't take you out now, you'll never get out." The Jews were falling apart. Spiritually, they were falling apart. God had to reach in, break the glass, and pull the Jews out early. And he would make things more whole by giving them the Torah. The Torah would help us use that 190-year shorten that 190-year gap. But like you said, at the golden calf, they weren't ready, and they blew it anyways. But we're not at the golden calf, so we'll talk about that later. So Moses goes. He convinces the Jewish people he's the leader. They understand he's a leader. He also uses a code word, pakod, that Joseph taught the elders who taught the elders who taught the elders in every generation. The Messiah is going to say this phrase, God will surely remember you, in a Hebrew language, and they knew when Moses used those exact words. Now Moses wasn't part of the Jewish people for all this time, so for him to use those words, they also knew God told him those words. How would he know those words? Right? That was being passed on, from elder to elder. Moses left the Jewish people when he was a teenager. So we're closing out now our lesson for today. So the last thing is Moses says to Pharaoh, "Let my people go," which is not really the English, but we'll use it. And I have to take my people out so they'll serve God. That's what it's really about. We have to leave to serve God. That's what he said to Pharaoh. Pharaoh said, "Who's God?" Who is this concept of the Jewish idea of God? And when he said that to Pharaoh said, "Okay, these Jews are taking too much time. They got too much time on their hands. They're thinking about God and spiritual life." So he said he increased their burdens on them. And in doing so, the Jews complained to Moses, "You came to redeem us, and now our burdens are twice as hard. The Nazis have taken away our bread, and they're making us work 8 more hours a day. Thanks a lot." And Moses goes to God and says, "You made a mockery of me." And God says at the end, the last line of this week's Parsha, "You'll see. I'm going to take the Jews out. I'm going to do it, Moses. You're not going to do it. You were never going to do it, Moses. I'm doing it. You're just my messenger." And that's something for us in life. It's not that we're doing it. God's letting us look like we're doing it. God is doing it. So if you really want to get an edge on life, just say this every day: "God, I just want to do your will. If I can do your will, make my will your will." And we say, it's a lesson in Ethics of the Fathers, if you diminish yourself in front of God's will, then God will diminish other people in front of your will. And that's what he's trying to teach Moses. Don't think you're taking the Jewish people out. I'm taking them out. You're just my vehicle. All right, that's the first installment of the Passover story, and we will continue next week, okay?
Thank you.
Good Shabbos, everybody.
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. Take care.
Happy 2019.
Happy 2019.
Lashana Tova, everybody. Lashana Tova.
Lashana Tova.
Okay. No, by the way, I'll give you one more idea. New Year's, when the non-Jewish New Year's comes up, what does it mean? It means we already had New Year's 3 months ago, and we also were ahead of them by about 3,700 years in terms of civilization. Got to think about that. Jews are 3,700 years ahead of the world. So look back on what you told God back there in September on Rosh Hashanah. How was your life going to look like? What were you going to do? How were you going to be better? Hey, it's been 3 months. Check in with God. What are you doing? That's how you use a new year. They say Happy New Year, and we say, what have I done for this the last 3 months? Okay, take care, everybody. Shabbos.
Very good.
Regardless of fun.
Bye-bye.
Bye.